Hello chess buddies, welcome to Amateur Chess University. In one of my previous videos, some of you have stated that I'm talking very fast. So I have taken that mistake into account and decided to go more steadier from here on. In today's analysis, we'll be looking at the round 5 game between Shakhriyar Mamedyarov and Jorden Van Foreest in the Tata Shield Master 2022 event. This game features some interesting tactical ideas from both the players. So without further ado, let's head straight into the game. Van Foreest here had the white pieces and he begins with e4, going for the king's pawn opening. e5 by Mamedyarov, Nf3 and knight to c6, bishop to b5 by white, setting up the Ruy Lopez, and black replied with a6, going for the Morphy defense. Here white plays bishop a4, going for the Columbus variation of the Morphy's defense, and black here plays knight to f6, castling by white, and knight captures the pawn on e4, d4 by white, and b5 by black, targeting the a4 bishop, and white brings the bishop to b3, targeting this weak pawn at f2. Black blocks this by playing pawn to d5. Now the d4 pawn captures the pawn on e5, and white attacks this d5 pawn twice. So here black plays bishop to e6, here pawn, and black pushes the pawn to b4. White develops the dark square bishop, bringing it to e3, and black brings his dark square bishop to e7, preparing itself for castling. Now there are two games in the database where white developed the knight from b1 to d2. However, here Van Foreest pushed his a4 pawn to a5, and it is as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. Now black castles and white played queen to d3, targeting this diagonal along with its bishop. Here black played knight to c5, attacking the queen. Van Foreest decided to eliminate this threat. So he played bishop captured the knight on c5, and Mamedyarov captured the bishop on c5 with his dark square bishop. And here white pushed the c2 pawn to c3, and here black played knight to e7, providing support to this d5 pawn, while also preparing to bring the light square bishop to f5 and target the queen. Now white develops the knight at b1, bringing it to d2. Now b4 pawn captures the pawn at c3 and b2 pawn captures the pawn at c3. The better idea for Mamedyarov in this position would have been to play his light square bishop to f5 and target the queen. However, he decided to move his dark square bishop back to a7, still maintaining the pressure on the king. His idea is to play the pawn from c7 to c5. Here Van Foreest played knight to d4, targeting the bishop at e6, and Mamedyarov moved his bishop back to d7. Here white played the knight at d2 to f3, preparing to bring the knight to f5, and Mamedyarov played his pawn to c5, targeting the knight at d4. Here Van Foreest came up with a brilliant idea, so feel free to pause the video and try to figure out the move Van Foreest played in this position. If you're able to figure it out, well done. The move played by Van Foreest in this position was pawn to e6. Now what can black play here? If Mamedyarov captures the e6 pawn with his f7 pawn, then Van Foreest will play knight to g5, threatening a checkmate. And if Mamedyarov plays knight to g6, then Van Foreest will capture the pawn at e6, targeting the queen and the rook. And if black captures the knight at e6, then white will play knight captures the bishop at e6, again targeting the queen and the rook. The only option for black here is to play c4, attacking the bishop as well as the queen. And if knight captures the queen at d8, then pawn captures the queen at d3, and white will capture the pawn at d5 with the bishop, going a material up and deliver a check, while also attacking this rook. And the black king will be forced to move to h8. Here Foreest can play knight to f7, delivering a check again. And if the king moves to g8, then he will play knight to e5, delivering a check while also attacking the knight. And if king moves to h8, then knight captures the knight at g6, delivering a check. And pawn captures the knight at g6, and bishop captures the rook at a8, captures the bishop at a8. And if you look at this position, white has 2 rooks and 5 pawns against black, which has 4 pawns, a rook and a bishop. So white will be under complete control in this game. So after pawn to e6 by white, black cannot capture it with the f6 pawn. So Mamedyarov was forced to move his bishop back to e8. Now Van Foreest played a knight to g5, threatening the checkmate, and Mamedyarov blocks it by playing pawn to f5. Here Van Foreest played knight to f7, targeting the queen at d8. Mamedyarov can capture this knight at f7 with his rook or the bishop. Capturing the knight with the bishop is not a good idea because if bishop captures the knight at f7, then pawn captures the bishop at f7, and rook captures the pawn at f7. And here white will play knight to e6, threatening the queen and entering the black's territory. So Mamedyarov captured the knight at f7 with his rook. Now pawn captures the rook at f7, bishop captures the pawn at f7. White's knight at d4 is still under attack from the c5 pawn. So here Van Foreest played knight captured the pawn at f5, and now Mamedyarov moved his pawn to c4, blocking the bishop and the queen. This was a good move by Mamedyarov, and here Van Foreest had no other option but to capture the pawn at c4 with his bishop. Now Mamedyarov cannot capture the bishop at c4 immediately because if it does so, then white will go for a queen exchange, capturing the queen at d8. Rook captures the queen at d8, and knight captures the knight at e7. And in this position, black has two bishop pair with a rook. However, white equalizes with two rooks and a knight. So instead, after the right square bishop captured the pawn at c4, black captured the knight at f5. The best idea for Van Foreest in this position would have been to capture the knight at f5 in exchange for his light square bishop. However, he decided to save his light square bishop, decided to capture this free pawn at c6. Here Mamedyarov played his knight to d6, moving away from the white king, and Foreest moved his king to f3, attacking the f file, while also targeting this diagonal, pinning the pawn at d5. Now Mamedyarov played the dark square bishop to c5, opening the threat of rook captures the bishop at a6, and Foreest moved his bishop to d3, captures the pawn at a5, rook captures the rook at a5, and queen captures the rook at a5. And here white plays pawn to h4. If you are wondering, black queen can capture the pawn at c3, that is not possible, because then white will play bishop captures the pawn at h7, delivering a check and picking up the queen. So after pawn to h4 by white, black played pawn to h5. Here white played pawn to g3, and black played knight to e8. Here Van Foreest played pawn to c4. The d5 pawn captures the pawn on c4, and Van Foreest played his light square bishop to h7, targeting the king. Now Mamedyarov cannot capture the bishop at h7 with his king, because if he does so, then Van Foreest will capture the bishop at f7 with his queen, attacking the knight, pawn at c4, and pawn at h5. So after bishop to h7 check, Mamedyarov moved his king to f8. Here Van Foreest moved his light square bishop to g6, launching a double attack on the f7 bishop, while also targeting the h5 pawn. Here Van Foreest was expecting Mamedyarov to play knight to d6, and then pick up this pawn at h5. However, Mamedyarov addressed this problem by playing knight to f6, blocking the white queen's attack, while also providing support to the pawn at h5. Now Van Foreest decided to eliminate one of the bishops, so he captured the bishop at f7, and king captured the bishop at f7. Best idea for Van Foreest in this position would have been to play queen to b7, delivering a check. However, he played rook to c1, targeting the c4 pawn. Here Mamedyarov played his queen to c7. The idea for black here is, if the rook at c1 captures the pawn at c4, then the bishop will capture the pawn at f2, delivering a check. And if white king captures the bishop at f2, then black king will capture the rook at c4. Van Foreest realized this, so he moved his king to g2, stepping away from this diagonal. Here Mamedyarov played his dark square bishop to d4, providing additional support to this knight at f6, while also preparing to push the pawn to c3, queen to a8 by white, and pawn to c3 by black. And now white played queen to a2, delivering a check, and black played king to g6, queen to c2 by white, delivering a check again, and black played king to h6. Now white cannot give checks anymore, so Van Foreest played queen to d3, targeting the bishop at d4, and Mamedyarov here played queen to b7, delivering a check. Now Van Foreest moved his pawn to f3, blocking the check, and Mamedyarov played his queen to b2, delivering a check, while also targeting the rook at c1. And here Van Foreest played rook to c2, and Mamedyarov played his rook to b1, preparing to bring the queen to g1 next and deliver a check. Queen to f5 by white, preparing to push his pawn to g4 next. Play queen to f5. Mamedyarov doesn't allow this. He played bishop to e3, blocking the f4 and g5 square from the axis of white queen. And here white played king to h3, preparing to bring the rook to h2 if queen delivers a check at h1. And here Mamedyarov played queen to d1, and it was in this position after move 44 that Van Foreest resigned the game. So let's see why he resigned the game. Mamedyarov's idea was to play bishop to d2 next and blocking the rook at c2, the moving to h2. And if Van Foreest played the rook to g2, even then Mamedyarov would have played bishop to d2, pawn to c2 coming up next. Black is certainly winning this game. So that's the game. Mamedyarov continues to be impressive in the Tata Steel Masters tournament, obtaining yet another victory. If you have any thoughts on the game, feel free to share. Thank you for watching. Take care. See you.